What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a very quick emergency episode of the Top Dogs podcast here. We got to talk a little bit about Stephon Castle and the fact that he is going to miss some time with a knee injury. The report that we got, it was from Donna Morey over at the Hartford Courant, is that Dan Hurley says Stephon Castle, after the MRI, will miss some time with the knee injury, but it does not appear to be season ending. The appear to be season ending part of that report from Dom is the thing that I think people are getting a little bit up in arms about. My understanding of the situation is that this is not a super serious knee issue. We're not talking like torn ACLs here. We're talking a little bit of a knee thing that needs some time and needs some rest and needs to get healthy so that it doesn't become something more significant as the season goes on. The vibe that I am getting from talking to different people is that this could end up being something that is as long as 4 weeks, maybe as short as 2 weeks, but definitely going to be some time on the shelf. Although it does appear as if he should be back in shape and back ready to go by the time that Big East play begins. So let's put a little bit into context before we move on, because today is Friday, November 17th. Exactly 2 weeks from today is December 1st, when UConn makes the trip to Phog Allen Fieldhouse to play at Kansas. Exactly 4 weeks from today is December 15th, which is the day when UConn takes on Gonzaga out in, I believe that is in Seattle, if I'm remembering correctly. They also play North Carolina on December 5th, which is a Tuesday night, which is the Jimmy V Classic. And in addition to playing in the Empire Classic, which begins on Sunday. So obviously Castle is not going to be available for the Empire Classic. My guess, knowing how this staff has tended to lean towards dealing with injuries in the past, is that Castle probably will not be available. I would bet on him not being available for Kansas or for North Carolina. I have no insight on that. I'm not reporting that this is what anybody has told me. I'm not sourcing this information. It's just reading the tea leaves. It seems like it's more likely that this would be something where they will be overly cautious bringing him back. Again, look, this is a kid that is probably going to end up being a top 10 pick, that is definitely going to be an NBA player, that has 8 to 9 figures of income coming his way as long as he can stay healthy and stay in the mix as a professional athlete. So I think you tend to err on the side of caution there, and I think that's the smart thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do as a coaching staff, and I think it's something that if I was advising Castle, it would be what I would advise him to do as well. So I think there's a better chance that he will be available for that Gonzaga matchup. I will say this before getting into what I think needs to happen with him gone. UConn has enough on their roster that I think that they probably should be able to beat Indiana without him. I think that they should, in theory, be able to beat Texas without him, especially if Dylan Disu isn't back in time for that to happen. Dylan Disu is still dealing with the foot thing that held him out of the Elite Eight last year against Miami. Going into Kansas, into the Phog Allen Fieldhouse, I don't think that UConn is going to win that game. I mean, it's the Phog, man. Nobody goes into the Phog and wins. So that is a tough ask with Stephon Castle. It is even a more difficult ask without Stephon Castle. So that's just kind of, to me, that's a free space, regardless of whether or not he is on the roster. And then North Carolina and Gonzaga, for both of those games, I don't think you necessarily have to have him. I think there is enough left on this roster to be able to compete and or win those matchups. Even if Castle is not available. And the good news is December 20th is when Big East play starts. That's 4.5 weeks away. So assuming that this timeline is correct and he's able to get back here in a month, then once we get to Big East play, that is something where he'll be available. And I've mentioned this before, UConn's start to the Big East season is relatively favorable. They don't play one of Creighton, Providence, or Marquette until January 17th when they play Creighton at home. Before that, they get Seton Hall, St. John's, DePaul, Butler, Xavier, and Georgetown, which for my money are going to be the 6 teams that finish in the bottom 6 spots in the Big East this season. So It's going to be a tough close, but you should hope that Clingan and Castle, both of them, are back to 100%, back to 100% in shape, back to 100% of kind of being right, not just, not being rusty, not being looking like Clingan does right now, having sat out for a month. I don't think that this is necessarily something that is going to be a season ender. And frankly, this might be a hot take, but I think that without Castle on the floor, it is going to force Dan Hurley to put some of these freshmen in, put some of these young guys in, put some of these bench players in, and make them learn on the fly, right? I think what we've seen so far this season is that Jaden Ross is still kind of figuring things out. The ability is there. We know what he did this spring and this summer. We know what has been coming out of stores. It's not just me hearing that he's been really impressive. So it's going to force him to play more minutes. It's going to force Jalen Stewart to play more minutes. It's likely going to force Solo Ball to step into the starting lineup and have to be more of a threat. And offensively, I'm not really worried. Like, honestly, I think with a guy like Solo Ball out there, with a guy like Isaiah Stewart out there, with a guy like Jaden Ross out there, you're probably getting a little bit better on the offensive side because you're adding another shooter and you still have two playmakers in Cam Spencer and Tristan Newton. You lose a little bit of that dynamism, and I think that you lose the guy that is the best on the roster when it comes to getting downhill, when it comes to being able to get into the lane, when it comes to being able to drive and find shooters on the perimeter. But Cam Spencer is capable of that. Tristan Newton is obviously capable of that. And you just put another guy that is a perimeter threat on the floor when you have probably the best rim running roll man in Donovan Clingan that you can find. So I don't think the issue is going to be on the offensive end. The question to me is going to be defensively, because Stephon Castle is the best perimeter defender that UConn has. He is the guy that you put on the opposing team's best score. He is the guy that you put on the opposing team's point guards at times. One of the things that we saw the first couple games is that Stephon Castle was the guy that would be defending the point guard 94 feet and providing some ball pressure there. He's the guy at the point of attack that I think is the best on the roster. And I don't know who replaces that. Solo Ball is a really impressive athlete. He's not as big, he's not as physical, and I don't think he's quite as strong as Castle is, which means he's a little bit more limited in terms of who he can guard. Like, he can guard ones and twos. I think Castles can guard ones, twos, and threes, and potentially even fours if you're playing against a little bit of a smaller team. Hassan Diarra, really, really good on-ball defender, but he's another guy that is kind of limited in who he guards. Like, he basically put him on point guards and maybe smaller twos. You can't really switch him up and down the lineup as much as you can Castle or even Solo Ball. Tristan Newton is not a great on-ball defender. I don't think Cam Spencer is a great on-ball defender. So I think that's where you're going to have to see some of this stuff get figured out. Now, again, getting Stewart more minutes, getting Ross more minutes, getting Ball more minutes, I think long term that is going to be something that will really help UConn, in the sense that Castle is ready. Like, he's not playing like a freshman, right? He's playing like a dude that is ready. He's playing like a dude that is going to contribute. He's playing like a guy that is a veteran, right? He's not playing like someone that is still kind of figuring things out. Like, for Ball, I think it's just going to be reps and getting hot. Like, he's always going to be a little bit of a streaky guy, I think. So I think you're going to have some games where maybe he scores like 6 to 8, and then you're going to have games where he scores 22 or 24, and that's just who he is as a player. A guy like that, love him coming off the bench. If you got to put him in the starting lineup, it is what it is. With Ross, I think the key is going to be developing the confidence to kind of be able to step out there and be able to impact games the way that we think he can impact games, and getting more minutes against higher level competition. That's the way that you find out if you're going to be able to do it, right? You either develop that confidence or you don't. You either learn that you can get it and figure things out, or you don't. And with Stewart, to me, the biggest issue there is going to be he's got to figure out what he's doing, right? Like I said this on the pod yesterday. The word coming out of stores involving Stewart, or involving Jaden Ross, and how good he was, I think part of that was a motivational tactic. Now, again, I'm not sourcing this. I'm not saying like this is what the coaching staff had told me, but reading the tea leaves, it feels like that might have been a motivational tactic now to get Isaiah Stewart ready. Like, the talent is there. He makes some plays that is just not normal to make. And he also does some things where you're like, yeah, that kid doesn't really know what he's doing yet, hasn't really figured it out. So giving him reps to kind of learn on the fly, like, it's just something that's going to have to happen. And I know that there's part of the staff that is a little bit uncomfortable doing that, and I don't blame them. You know, when you have a certain level of perfection and a certain standard for what you want your guys to do, and it's not happening, it's difficult to just throw a guy out there and kind of like let it go. But I think that's they're gonna be forced to do that here with in the coming weeks without Stephon Castle on the floor. So I'm not super concerned about it. This is not something where I don't believe we're going to end up waiting until like the end of January to get Castle back. I don't think this is a situation like Nick Smith where we look up in February and Castle is sitting out because he's already protecting his draft stock. I don't think that he's wired that way. So hopefully this is just a couple of a week thing. My guess is it's probably a little bit closer to a month, but I do think that once Big East play comes around, we're probably going to still have them available. And the way that I'm going to justify it in my mind is that this is going to force some of the other young guys to figure things out. And I think that once we get to January, once we get to February, once we get to the close of the season where UConn has home to Marquette, at Creighton, home to Villanova, home to Seton Hall, at Marquette, at Providence as their final 6 games. Once you get to the Big East tournament, once you get to the NCAA tournament, I think those last 6 weeks of the season, to me, not having Castle, the silver lining is that it's going to force those other guys to figure things out so that once we get to that point in time, it's going to be a little bit of a deeper roster, and maybe they'll be able to force, I think that I said this the other day. Best case scenario that you can have with this team is a guy like Jalen Stewart forces his way into getting more minutes, because I think that's going to raise the status of this group. I think it's going to make them better overall, and I think it's going to make the team better as a whole. So I'm not freaking out about it. I'm not super concerned about it, and I hope that the decision to play it cautious will be better for Castle in the long run, for UConn in the long run, and I'm fired up about Sunday. I'll see you guys there. I will be in the building, and I'm bringing my kids to their first ever UConn game. So let's find a way to get it done, boys. I'll see you guys on Sunday. As you guys know by now, we've partnered with BetMGM Sportsbook for this college basketball season. We're going to be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks and predictions throughout the college basketball season. And we are going to have special offers for you, the listeners and the viewers on the Field of 68 each and every week during the season. If you haven't signed up with BetMGM yet, use the bonus code FIELD1500 and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager on BetMGM Sportsbook. Here's what you got to do. Download the BetMGM app. Sign up using the bonus code FIELD1500. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if that bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code FIELD1500 when you sign up. And remember, BetMGM is now available under one wallet in select states. As a New Jersey resident, this is super convenient for me when I have to go cover games in New York or Philly. When crossing state borders, just log into your existing account instead of having to create new accounts in each state that you go to. And most importantly, I got to let you know, we do have some fun stuff coming up for this college basketball season. Bet insurance tokens, college hoops odds boosts, my personal favorite, parlay odds boosts. So download the BetMGM app today.